Welcome to another episode of the Breakneck Podcast with Ian, and I'm Matt. We are going to talk today about Claude Code, Claude Cowork. Everybody started using this maybe a month or two ago. You started to hear everyone saying, oh, Claude Code is no joke. So we're going to break down exactly what it does and the new release of Claude Cowork. We're going to talk about what we've been doing with it, what we've been hearing other people doing with it. But the quick overview is that it's going to just completely change how everybody works. And I know I'm on a podcast, so it sounds like I'm hyping. So that is the thesis that I'm personally going to defend, is that a lot of the things that companies I've worked for have paid people to do, I have seen Claude do a far better job completely out of the box. And so I wanted to break through those use cases. And there's some stuff I've never would have thought to do that are happening. And then maybe we talk about doom and what people are worried about, because, you know, I'm chatting with people and it's like, man, we have like, it's over for developers, or it's over for
It's not
monkey and spreadsheet people like us. And so that's maybe something we can have some disagreement. But let's break down, what's your experience with Claude been over the past few weeks?
Yeah, well, my experience is with Claude Code originally for quite a while now. I don't know, whenever it came out, 9 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Focus has really been using it in the context of an IDE to write code. That's what most people have been using it for, hence the name, I presume, Claude Code. It seems to me in the last 30 to 60 days, I've seen multiple examples and scenarios of people taking Claude Code and using it outside of the context of using it for actually writing code. But what was new to me was the arrival of Claude Cowork last week. And maybe, I don't know how well people know this stuff, but Claude Code is terminal-based, so old school, like almost DOS-like, where you're writing in commands. Very, very powerful. And then Claude Cowork is also desktop-based, but a much more consumer-esque UI to allow you to do a bunch of different things. And so really what they've done is they said, wow, Claude Code works really well. Where else could you use it? And in that context, Claude Cowork, I got it about a week ago and tasked it with some kind of crazy stuff, and it hit the nail on the head. And so kind of the working model in my mind here is that, and I'd love to get your perspective on it maybe as we delve deeper into it, there's this notion of a personal agent that just does stuff for you.
Yeah,
and
I
it's
think
sort of all-knowing, not all-knowing, all-seeing, but capable of a bunch of different things, and it doesn't need a lot of context. And I'm seeing glimmers of that in Claude Cowork, which has this underpinning of Claude Code. So anyway, that's what's whirling through my mind at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, my initial experience, I have not used Claude Code before, and then you're like, let's do this episode in January. So I was like, okay, let's get down to it. So I go in, I use Claude, and now I don't really particularly want to write software development, software. I don't want to write web pages. The things that was missing for me was, doing sales, fundraising, just operations of a startup. There's a lot of deck creation, and there is a lot of financial modeling. So my first use case was financially modeling my company. And I always have a financial model, and I'm always looking at like, okay, what is our margins? What are our expectations? What does growth look like? Scenario planning and stuff like that. But, those things get out of date. Deals close. And then also there's just, stuff. I'm a physicist, so I like to model stuff, that's a quadratic, that's linear, but then there's the actual detailed stuff. And sometimes it's like, you go through a model and you're like, yeah, this is roughly our ramp over this period of time. But you actually now, you have contracts and you have invoices and you have people, actual people getting paid, and you know exactly how much each person gets paid each month and all that stuff, right? And, you go in, you could buy a big software system, put it all in, but, with Claude Code, I went and created a spreadsheet and did a great initial model. Now, this is a model that you can talk to. I'm literally, I just push the button and I say, this is what I'd like to change, the margins of that much more months. And I'd like to associate that expense more with COGS and blah, blah, blah. And so you can do all of these changes, and it returns that result in 2 or 3 minutes And it does it in a way that is very consistent, in the sense that if you wanted to make an additional change, it's actually building a Python file in the background using pandas and a lot of the tools that, I've used, but they're just kind of like, you have to know exactly how to use them. It's just smashing it out. So I used to be a data scientist, so I appreciate how it's doing it and how the data is being produced. But the result is I built a model that incorporated every single payment I've ever made, every single invoice I've ever issued, every contract, my bank statements, right? And so I went from modeling kind of like with sticks and putty, you just kind of like, it's a rough model, to like, no, this is actually the entire calculus of the company. Give me my invoice aging, like who's paid, who owes, what's my total receivables, what's the expected cash flows and stuff. Like you just say, actually model that over these months. Now you need to stay very involved with it, but that's not a coding example. That's something that you would pay a pretty big finance team to do. And I can immediately see opportunities like, well, I could do all my invoicing here, right? And then you say, I don't want to actually write the invoice, and I'm just going to dump the documents that I'm using to create my invoice in there. And that was what it was. It was like, I threw the bank statement. I go to my bank account, downloaded bank statements, threw them in, and say, okay, this is the model. Like use this to model, and then it just updates everything, and it creates artifacts of like all my bank statements consolidated, invoicing consolidation, payment consolidation, talking about which employees were doing which things. All of that is done in 3 or 4 hours, right? Now, if I had been on some insane Jack Kerouac amphetamines bender, I probably could have got all that done in 8 or 9 hours if I was so focused. But I got it done in 3 hours, and I was not focused. I was just like, nah, that's not great. I wasn't like in like my total locked in. It was like it was end of day. I started at 5 p.m. and I did it until the kids needed to go to bed. And that's so different. So that's my personal story. And then I use it from other use cases. But just that, finance people, step the fuck up. Like that is not a Claude code for engineers. That is coming straight after finance. I would pay somebody probably a full-time job in a lot of companies I've seen for these types of things. Done. Just done.
That model is the same kind of model. This notion of, let me gather enough context for you, let me point you at it, let me give you some guidance. When you pop back up for air as an agent, I'm going to guide you a little bit. I'm going to say no, and then I'm going to have another idea, and I'm work my way through it. And at some point in time, like, holy crap, I got to where I would have gotten in 9 hours. That is the same scenario as writing code has been on Claude Code. And in fact, writing code is inaccurate, because I don't really write code anymore. What I do have, like you, is a kind of a fundamental understanding of how this stuff should all tie together. I have a model in my own mind. So I think there's a bunch of, there's a lot of work that we do that is like that is quite structured in nature, and is probably not done that often. But when you do it, it needs to be done right. And then it probably shifts into more of a maintenance mode. So financial model, maybe you do financial model every year. You get to the end of the year and you're like, nah, okay, the world's changed. We understand it differently. Let's start from scratch and build a new one.
I would love to work at a company that needed financial model updates once a year. That would be very enjoyable.
Well, I mean, more so in terms of the actual model. You're like, oh, all the assumptions are wrong. This doesn't make any sense anymore. Let's just start from scratch. We're at a bigger scale now.
Yeah.
Look,
No.
that
It was both generating this at a much better level of granularity and a much more maintainable model too, because man, once you get in with all the rules and stuff, and the model, the thing was, no, this is a Python data engine with a whole bunch of validated data inputs, assumptions that are stated in English, and then the model is just generated from that. And I think the key here, and we might have talked about this in the past, is human in the loop works really well when it takes the model 25 minutes and it takes you 2 minutes to validate that that's actually what needed to happen. You don't want it the other way, where you're spending most of your time looking at what it's doing, and then it works for 30 seconds and then you spend another 20 minutes. Sometimes that's nice to kind of like take something that you're not great at or a technology to understand. But my experience was I could get it to the point where I give it a bunch of rules and heuristics. I would give it some outlines and boundaries. And once we kind of agreed on those, then it was very fast, and it was mostly spending the tokens. Now, here's one thing that's very important. you need to be prepared to spend $200 a month with Anthropic. And I wasn't. I was like, I called you, right? I was like, hey, Cowork came out. Is it really worth going to the $100 a month plan? And you're like, nah, not really, not for Cowork. And then they released Cowork as part of the lower tier that I was already on, the $20 a month plan. And I was like, great, don't have to pay for Cowork. Then I started using Cowork, immediately ran out of tokens because it was so valuable. And then I was like, 200, let's max this out. And I'm like telling people in my team, I'm like, are you having token problems? Like max it out, max it out, max it out.
Yeah.
Very, and so one thing that I want, we're just going to talk about our feelings in this podcast. But one thing I saw and I wanted to discuss is I've had several sessions of, getting a substantial amount of shit I needed to get done. I've had, for 3 months, like, I should do that. Like I had one was like consolidate every invoice ever. And I had them in a few different places. And I used Cowork and just said, go through. And what I did is I took my Google Docs and I replicated them. You can use Google Drive. I replicated them to my local machine. So now all the docs are synced. And then I said, they're either going to be in one of these folders. I want every single one, and then do a few checks, like look for duplicates, look for date duplication, invoice duplication, look for missing, I had some rules, found every single one, put them in a folder, synced it back to Google Drive, and then shared it with the people that needed it shared with. And that was something that I had just been putting off because I don't know how long that would take. An hour, hour and a half. It was 2 minutes, and it's
Well,
like, and it was fun because the 2 minutes were mostly the computer doing it. And I don't even type. I just I got whisper flow and I just hit my function button and start talking.
Here's the bit that intrigues me, and you'll be able to help us kind of paint the landscape a little bit here. So at the one end of the spectrum, we've got writing code, building financial models, very structured, long-running tasks. That only works if you give it the context, right? Give it the invoices, give it the whatever. At the other end of the spectrum, you have tasks like you just talked about, and I did an interesting one, which is I have these bio photos. And every now and then, I don't know, once every 3 months, I create a new account somewhere or something, and I need, where's a photo of me? I just want to put that in there. And I don't never remember what the file name is. I don't remember where it is. I just said, I've got some professionally taken bio photographs. Can you find them, please, for me and put them in a folder? And it found them. Now, some of them have my name in it. Maybe that was helpful. And then other ones, they just I would never find them random photos. I'm like, oh shit, I forgot how that one. That's much better. So the point of bringing that up is it's about the nature of work. We have kind of one-off random, easy for human to do task, but you need to have broader sort of understanding and context of what did you mean when he meant a bio photo? Like, what is that? Like, where do I look? And so you have kind of one-off unstructured weird shit like that. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have financial model or build me some code or whatever. And the thing that got me excited, I did more stuff than that. I asked it to free up some storage space. And I kind of knew it was going to be able to do that because it was in some of their examples. But we went on this big, long conversation. Eventually, I got it to visualize my history and characterize me as a user of this laptop. And it had, you had your 3D printing phase and your this phase and that phase. And I was like, holy shit, this is cool. But I'm probably the only person in the world that's ever asked, an agent to do that. So my question is, how useful are these agents going to be, given that there's a distribution of this type of work? Big, structured, long-running stuff at one end, and then at the other end, completely random, unique to Ian. He might only ask you once in his whole lifetime to do this task. Like, what does a distribution of that nature of work for humans look like? And so, how good do these agents need to be?
This is, I think, the big theme I have here is that there are huge numbers of people who are going to be affected by AI in the near future. Every engineer knows they need to engage with Claude Code, or they should at least. But all the ones that I work with are using agents, are using multiple agent orchestration workflows, right? Like, so you can do there, it's like you have to adopt it. You have to think about your code. Like, I'm not going to actually read a lot of the code I write. You have to be thinking in evals and tests and checkpoints and security bots and linting and but AI has to be a huge part of what you're doing, right? And then you go right across the aisle. And the aisle being from engineering to like business people, nobody's using it. Nobody's using it, right? You talked about some of your friends that we won't name, but like just getting it into these big corporations. And I think that's going to happen now in the next month or two, is everyone's going to start playing with this. And I think Cowork was a genius thing, because I think Claude Code basically does everything that Cowork does, in my opinion, right? It has file access. It can use Bash. It can call Opus. It can do all kinds of tool calls and things like that. But Cowork basically is a signal that you should be making slide decks. And I'm not going to describe my slide deck techniques. I had been working in, you've been part of my little like secret meeting group where we discuss the if you're interested, reach out, invite only.
Are you going
Not
to
going to
mention the
discuss my
name of it?
what?
You're going to
No,
mention the name? I love the
no, we're
name.
not going to. No, it's secret.
Okay.
Look, you got to get to the paid tier of
Oh, it's members only.
it's members
Okay.
only. It's
There we go.
Breakneck is the free product, but just know that
Okay.
there are some insane, and a lot of people are using these, like Nano Banana and things like that to create parts of slides. But then there's fully automated slide deck workflows, from listening to a conversation, research, synthesizing a great sales narrative, for instance, synthesizing the entire deck, adding images. Like, that is going to be done. Like, that's what I was playing with. It was like, how many people did I pay? Because we focus on project management, and how many of the people that we were paying to do project management in previous companies spent 7 or 8 hours a week producing much worse slides than Opus makes right now? How many people are creating spreadsheets and updating spreadsheets where essentially you can just create a folder, go in with Claude and say, okay, like all this data, here's what I'm trying to do with it, validate it, and then you create yourself some checkpoints that's exactly the right number of people, that's how much people get paid, that's the margins, or this is the whatever the business application is. It needs to move from I'm entering cell by cell, or I'm creating rules in cell by cell, to I'm creating context, I'm creating data sources. And it could just be using Cowork to say, look at my whole machine and all the documents that I have access to on Google in these folders, and put them all here, synthesize them into a data set, and then create an output in Excel that looks like this, right? And I used to be a data scientist. That's what people used to do to me. Like, go look it up, do it. All that's done end to end. And so between those two, which is generating slides and generating decks, that's the missing middle. Like, yeah, some people are going to go look up photos, and some people are going to create whole applications with vibe coding, but there are millions of professionals. There's 400,000 project managers in North America in the technology industry. There's 7 million project managers worldwide. I know these numbers because I have to have your TAM of your company. Every single person there is essentially, that's a third of their workload gone. Like right now, like I that's the thing I was validating for myself over the last, couple weeks, and it's gone. It's over. This model is clearly more than good enough. And the places where it's even hard are obviously going to be solved. Whatever people feel about coders in 2025, and by the way, everyone's still coding. There's actually more stuff getting done. There's more stuff to be done. I don't know if this is going to cause people, we can talk about like, are it's going to limit people's jobs, but every single person listening to this podcast needs to go buy the Max Claude and be using it every day. Because I just don't know any business application that your first run shouldn't be Opus 4.5. And there's been people like this for 2 years that, they check with ChatGPT first or whatever. But man, like I don't see the difference between its output and what I would do.
I'm going to disagree with you on this, in the sense of, if you have repetitive tasks that you might train somebody to do, that might be a kind of a way to qualify, like building a financial model, like building a presentation, then Claude Code, Claude Cowork, other tools out there, they're going to make you more efficient. The challenge is, if you have a job that is made of 50 somewhat random tasks that an LLM has not yet been taught to do, then I would have said until 1 week ago that There isn't a lot to be worried about. Also, there isn't a lot of opportunity because these tools haven't kind of really mastered. You could go to something like Manus and try that out, but nothing has really kind of delivered on the promise until Cowork showed up. And Cowork is here's something we definitely need to talk about. Cowork is the browser version of Claude Code, right? Where you have terminal. It's like it's like when we saw Netscape
Yeah.
for the first time, and there's a longer run on this, but let's just talk about it in the context of if I'm not a person who does these big chunky sit at my desk for 3 hours, 6 hours pieces of work, I'm somebody who's kind of running around and like, oh shit, my boss just asked me to do this thing. How do I do that? I need to do that and this and the other. 7 weird, unrelated steps. As long as they are digital steps, or can do them. Maybe not all of them, but it's the first time I've seen something actually do these kind of random type thing without a lot of instruction.
Yeah. My problem with the browser feel of it is that the fucking Claude is buggy. They're like, oh, we built this with Claude Code in a week and a half. And it's like, yeah, it fucking
You can
crashes all
tell.
the time and it's annoying as
Yeah, yeah,
hell.
yeah.
Open the terminal, navigate to a folder, and push Claude. And essentially, that's the only real advantage I felt of using that terminal. The Claude application on Mac was that you just didn't have to like know to open the terminal. I actually enjoyed much more the Claude Code experience in the terminal than trying to wait and do all this stuff in
Agreed, but
Claude
you're a
Code.
power user, right? I'm talking about kind of the I mean, look, if you know what a terminal is, that makes you a power user.
But the other thing I didn't like about Claude Code is a lot of times it would also use this artifacts concept. And so it would basically use the
Claude
chat
Cowork, you mean?
Cowork, excuse me. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
going to be very
Yeah, the
difficult for
naming's
people to
terrible, yeah.
understand. I realize that if I say the word that's the opposite of what I mean, it makes it difficult to interpret. If you if you're using the Claude Cowork application, which is in Claude, it'll create artifacts and stuff. And really what I liked about Cowork and Claude is when they created files in my computer that were just human readable. I don't want these abstract compaction events and chat logs and artifacts and stuff like that. I like you write code on my machine that runs, and if I opened up another terminal or if I sent this to my coworker and said, Claude Code, look at this, it would look at it and say, I see what this does, and you could run it on your machine. Like super portable, no runtime, just code, and at worst case, Claude Code's going to figure out on another machine or in another instance or something crashes or I've changed my mind. Like you have something definite that's sitting on your code versus worrying about the ephemeral artifacts that are being.
Yeah, I get you, but that's a function of the use cases, right? If there's a real understanding of the structured output that you're trying to get to, and there might be multiple steps and there's handoffs and you need to keep that data structured to make those handoffs work, that's great. If you are exploring something, you're like, what's my invoicing rate? And can you map that against something else? And you're exploring visualization, and those artifacts become really great. But in general, I agree with you. I've been banging on about UI and how terrible the chat UI is. We've seen those artifacts show up, and they're good in places, and we've seen the multi-choice stuff, which is great, which showed up in Claude Code first, which was this: you ask it to do something, and it says, "Well, look, there's probably 3 ways you could do this. What do you, A, B, or C?" And you're like, "Well, now that you said C, I've got a couple more questions." And so it's structured to that chat engagement, which is great. I think we have to see more UI improvements and advancements to make
No,
this stuff
and you
work.
can see that they're doing a little bit more multimodal. I actually really loved Claude Code, which felt a little bit more thought through in terms of it had been around longer and has more usage probably, right? Like a week and a half is not enough time to really nail a lot of these multimodal. And when I'm talking about multimodal, showing you multiple pieces of context simultaneously, being good about like you can interrupt and advise and then restart. A lot of that stuff that the chat application doesn't do well has kind of been solved a little bit better. Um, but again, I really like it as I'm creating definite things that sit there, show me a graph. And that was one of the things I loved about Spreadsheet is I can upload it into Google Docs and I can see charts and you can have all the AI chart out every possible quantity you want. And for me, that was a fantastic multimodal experience. I can see the output indefinite. There's no question. I can share it with somebody immediately. I can get their feedback. We can use it as a living document going forward. The idea that it's all of that needs to be in the Claude application.
Hmm.
That's why I like that it's my terminal. I like that it's my file folders. I like that it's something that I can use those file folders to do other types of sharing or have other agents looking at and things like that. So coordinate across, oh, I'm using ChatGPT for this and Gemini for this. I use Gemini for Nano Banana stuff. Okay, well, these are all in the same file folders and I can coordinate that way. It's like the idea that we're going to stuff all of this into one window um, seems like a very
Mm,
hard problem to solve. I'm sure they would love that, but it's a hard problem for me to see that as the optimal solution.
yeah. I want to go back to the browser topic for a
I
second.
wonder if this episode makes any sense for anyone who hasn't used Claude Cowork, because like we're both clearly in it and we're referring
Yeah.
to stuff and artifacts and all of these things. And
Well, let's do. I think you've done a good job of describing code. Cowork is. I'm looking at the interface right now. Actually, why don't I just share? So here is Claude Cowork. Kind of looks a little bit browserish, like the browser experience actually on Anthropic. Here, let me find an example. Here's one. Kind of a random task. I have a YouTube channel with my son about our racing car. And
mm,
so I asked it to create a short clip from a file, a YouTube short clip. So it's a 5-minute long form YouTube video. So I told it choose a part of the video that has some energy to it, and off it went. It did an analysis, and then the artifact at the end is the actual file. You'll need to go to YouTube to watch that. The point being here that it's sort of a familiar output, right, or layout rather, right? So you got your chats on the left, you've got various kind of progress and artifacts and things going on here. So it's pretty damn familiar, I would say.
it's easy to. It's like from a critique perspective, it's underbaked, like, and it crashes, and it's
100%.
it's
100%.
laggy.
I'm not too worried about it because I saw that essence that I hadn't seen before, which is this, holy shit, I gave you such a vague task and you nailed it. And it wasn't just a one-step task. There was multiple steps to the task. So versus this stuff that it's probably been trained on before, which is writing code or financial models. But here's why I want to talk about the browser side of things. We've had Atlas, Dia, I think is another one. Perplexity has their one, Comet, and the idea, the idea from the vendor side was, oh, we want to suck you in and get you to do everything via our browser, and the response from consumers has been like, okay, well, it's just a browser. What am I going to do with this thing? And in Claude Cowork, what I think we have here is kind of the killer feature for a browser. You've given me a reason, in my work life to download a desktop app that frankly looks kind of similar to a browser, and you're going to get me to do really valuable stuff in here. It's a tiny, tiny step for me to click another button and start browsing the internet on this thing, right? So I actually think Anthropic has done a sneaky little number and slid their browser under our front door in the form of Cowork to get us using it. If I was
Yeah,
the
and
Google folks, I'd be nervous.
yeah, I agree that we had this question last year: what replaces the browser? And I think if anything, yeah, I think Cowork and this experience that I had, which is I'm telling you about what I want to do, and instead of me telling Google what I want to do and it providing websites, I'm going to be doing a much more in-depth, much more multi-step, and it's all going to be synthesized. And mostly, I'm just checking and giving it instructions.
Yeah, yeah. So I've been bigging it up here, Cowork, kind of the power of it and the potential. I do kind of want to talk a little bit about the pain. I think the big challenge in my kind of vision coming to fruition here is, will they be able to create the habit or make it habitual to use this, right? Wholly untrue, or it did not pan out with the AI browsers. Maybe that'll change. But this has more potential. But the real question is, and I was talking to somebody else last night, and they were, the complaint was like, this stuff is awesome, but I'm just not creative enough. Meaning I'm not thinking about stuff where I go, oh, well, obviously I'm going to go to Claude Cowork. So the question here is, can they create that loop, that habitual loop to draw us back in again and again and again? And
Yeah,
only time will tell.
I think it's the people I've been chatting with this, you and that group and friends on Messenger. Like, holy shit! Like a lot of our product manager friends have stuff for the last 15 years they've wanted to build, and 100 ideas, and it's incredible to get a first version in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Incredible. Let's switch gears, because I think we could just talk about features all day. My recommendation for everybody is, if you have business data problems that you have left unresolved for the last few months because you just didn't have the time, and $100 on Claude Code Max at minimum. You can buy the $200 package, because I was just like, this is not gonna. This is clearly this is worth $200 to me to get these 5 things done, and I got all those 5 things done in the first 3 hours. Then I started thinking about wild stuff. The wild stuff it's not great at yet, and you will quickly reach the limit if you are creative, or to the extent that I'm somewhat creative. Like, I don't think it's something where it's gonna do everything in your whole life and you'll run out of ideas. But it's worth $100. You can think about how much you make per hour. It'll save you 10 hours of work day one. So that's worth it. Like, go spend 4 hours with it, get it set up, figure out how to use it to solve your problems. That's worth it for me at this point. Now the anxiety I had in those first 4 hours, though, was, holy shit, everything's going to be done by this. And in hour 20, I kind of got to the point where, like, this kind of sucks. And that was reassuring. And it was a feeling of falling. I was like, oh no, it's all over. Everything's going to be done by AI. And then you realize that you staying in the loop with it, you will quickly get to the point where it's annoying. And you're like, no, come back. As you get into these more complicated workflows. And so I think we've been talking about there's the scope of what people think they need to be able to do, and the quality they need to be able to do it is going to go way up. But I now have a feeling, after these couple weeks of just being super Claude brained, nope, I know exactly what I'll be doing, even if all of this other stuff got done.
I've had that experience multiple times now. There's probably needs to be a name for that.
Mm-hmm.
We've spent a lot of time in order management and product support, customer support with AI, and we've seen exactly the same. You hit the ceiling and you're like, okay, now what's next? I've seen it myself in terms of developing products. So the same pattern repeats again and again. All right, Matt. Well, we've covered a lot of ground this week. Let's land it there.
Thanks. This has been personally very valuable to me. And if anybody gets anything out of this episode, go fucking download the tool.
There you
Get
go.
it. All right, guys.
All right, cheers, Matt. Thanks. Bye-bye.